Good evening, my dear friends, and welcome to another journey into the intriguing world of my esteemed companion, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Tonight, I invite you to settle into your armchairs, perhaps by a crackling fire, as we delve into a tale that began not with a frantic summons from Scotland Yard, nor with a desperate plea from a troubled client, but with a most peculiar and understated missive from an Undertaker. It was a case that took us through the labyrinthine streets of London, from the quiet solitude of private studies to the bustling chaos of forgotten docks, uncovering a mystery woven with threads of deception and ancient secrets. Prepare yourselves for an adventure where every shadow holds a clue and every whispered word might conceal a truth. And, should you find yourselves captivated by the unfolding enigma, I heartily invite you to subscribe to the channel, ensuring you miss none of our future chronicles. Now, let's begin with the first chapter of the letter from the Undertaker. Chapter 1. The Curious Corpse and the Cryptic Note. The fog, that ubiquitous drapery of London, had settled upon Baker Street with a particular tenacity one chilly October morning, muffling the usual clamour of the city to a dull murmur. I was engrossed in a recent medical journal, whilst Holmes, reclining in his armchair, his long slender fingers steepled beneath his chin, appeared lost in a profound reverie, the scent of his beloved tobacco filling our shared sitting-room. Our domestic tranquillity was, however, soon to be shattered by the arrival of a most unusual communication. Mrs. Hudson, with a characteristic rustle of her apron, entered bearing a silver tray upon which lay a single, rather stout envelope, sealed with black wax. "A messenger boy just brought this, Mr. Holmes," she announced, her voice a little hushed, as if the very sight of the black seal conveyed solemnity. Holmes's eyes, which had seemed to gaze into some distant, intricate pattern, sharpened instantly. He took the letter, breaking the seal with a precise flick of his thumb, and began to read. I observed a faint arch in his eyebrow, a subtle tightening around the corners of his mouth, signs that told me something beyond the ordinary had already captured his formidable intellect. "Remarkable, Watson," he murmured without looking up. "Quite remarkable. A summons not from the usual channels of justice, but from one who deals with its ultimate conclusion." He handed me the letter, a faint smile playing on his lips. The handwriting was neat, almost calligraphic, yet slightly tremulous. It read: "To Mr. Sherlock Holmes, S.N., 221 B. Baker Street. Sir, I take the liberty of addressing you regarding a matter of most unusual observation concerning the late Mr. Alistair Croft of Ashworth House, Belgravia. As proprietor of Grimshaw's funeral services, I have handled countless departed souls, yet Mr. Croft presents a conundrum that vexes my professional sensibilities. While the medical certification attributes his passing to natural causes, specifically a sudden cardiac event, certain irregularities have come to my attention during the preparation of the deceased. I hesitate to trouble the authorities without more substantial grounds, but my instincts, honed by years in this sombre profession, whisper of something amiss. I implore your singular discretion and acumen to examine the circumstances. I shall await your presence at Ashworth House at your earliest convenience. Yours in utmost sincerity and perplexity, Silas Grimshaw." Alistair Croft, I mused aloud, handing back the letter. A man of considerable fortune, if I recall, known for his philanthropic ventures and his extensive collection of antiquities. "Indeed, Watson," Holmes replied, rising and crossing to the window to peer through the swirling fog. "And now, known for possessing a secret that even the keen eyes of medical science have overlooked, but which the meticulous Mr. Grimshaw, a man whose trade requires an almost microscopic attention to detail, has managed to discern. The Undertaker, Watson, often sees things that the physician, in his haste to certify, misses. Let us not keep Mr. Grimshaw waiting. Ashworth House, Belgravia, sounds like a suitable beginning for our morning's exertions." Within the hour, our handsome cab navigated the grand tree-lined avenues of Belgravia. Ashworth House stood as a formidable bastion of Victorian prosperity, its Portland stone facade gleaming even through the oppressive fog. A solemn-faced butler, whose expression seemed permanently etched with an air of dignified sorrow, admitted us. We were led to the drawing-room, where Mr. Silas Grimshaw awaited us. He was a man of medium height, with a neat grey beard, sharp, intelligent eyes that darted nervously, and hands that were perpetually clasped as if in prayer. He wore a sober black suit, impeccably pressed, and exuded an air of quiet professionalism mingled with palpable anxiety. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I thank you for your promptness," Grimshaw said, his voice a low melodious rumble. "This matter has weighed heavily upon my conscience. Pray, Mr. Grimshaw, outline the precise nature of these irregularities you speak of," Holmes prompted, settling into a velvet armchair, his gaze already sweeping the opulent room, absorbing every detail. Grimshaw leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It was during the final dressing, sir. Mr. Croft, a man of 50-odd years, was a meticulous gentleman in life, always impeccably attired. Yet, when I prepared him, I discovered something most peculiar. Sewn into the lining of his dressing gown, a garment he was wearing at the time of his passing, I found a small pouch. Inside were 5 very ancient, very rare coins, each unlike any I have ever encountered. But it was not merely their presence that was odd. There was also a single dried leaf, sir. A leaf of a plant, I believe, not native to these shores, pressed flat and brittle, and the faint, almost imperceptible scent it carried. It was not the scent of the dressing gown, nor of the sick room, but something foreign, earthy and strangely sweet, lingering on his very skin beneath the cloth. Holmes's eyes, usually so impassive, now gleamed with an inner fire. A dried leaf, you say, and a peculiar scent. Did you observe anything else, Mr. Grimshaw? Any mark, bruise, or discoloration on the body not accounted for by the official report?" Grimshaw hesitated, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "Indeed, sir, this is what truly troubled me. On the sole of his left foot, just beneath the arch, there was a faint, almost circular abrasion. It was not a blister, nor a simple cut, but seemed etched, as if he had trod upon something small and sharp, yet it had not broken the skin, merely left a distinct impression, rather like a tiny, intricate symbol. I took the liberty of making a careful drawing of it before it faded, sir, fearing it might be overlooked." He produced a small, folded piece of paper from his inner pocket, offering it to Holmes with a trembling hand. Holmes took the sketch. It depicted a minuscule spiralling pattern, intricate and unsettling. He studied it for a long moment, then tucked it carefully into his waistcoat pocket. "Mr. Grimshaw, your observations are indeed exceptional. You have quite possibly unearthed a most perplexing mystery. May we now examine the study where Mr. Croft was found, and perhaps the dressing gown itself?" "Certainly, sir," Grimshaw replied, rising with a renewed sense of purpose. "The family, naturally distraught, are elsewhere. The housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, remains, but she has not been permitted to disturb anything." We followed Grimshaw through the silent, grand corridors of Ashworth House to Mr. Croft's study. It was a room steeped in the scent of old leather and forgotten tobacco, lined with towering bookshelves filled with weighty tomes. A large ornate globe stood in one corner, and a mahogany desk was cluttered with papers. The overall impression was one of ordered scholarly pursuit. Holmes immediately gravitated towards an imposing armchair by the unlit fireplace, pointing with a long finger. "He was found here, I presume?" "Precisely, sir," Grimshaw confirmed, slumped, as if in repose. Holmes knelt, examining the carpet, the hearth, even the floorboards beneath the armchair with a pocket magnifier. "Watson," he said, without looking up, "observe the faint trace of particulate matter adhering to the threads of the carpet here, near the chair's base. Not household dust, nor common London grime. See the microscopic, almost crystalline gleam within it, and the fainter, almost woody aroma that accompanies it." He retrieved a small glass vial from his kit and carefully scraped a tiny sample from the carpet. I bent low, my medical training enabling me to perceive the minute details he indicated. It was indeed a peculiar dust, faintly shimmering. The air even now carried a whisper of that exotic, earthy scent Grimshaw had mentioned. "This, Watson," Holmes declared, rising with a glint in his eye, "is not merely the dust of Belgravia, nor, I dare say, is it indicative of a simple cardiac event. We have, I believe, been invited to investigate a matter of far greater complexity, one rooted, perhaps, in the very antiquities Mr. Croft so avidly collected, and leading us far beyond the quiet confines of this drawing-room." He glanced at the impressive globe, a thoughtful expression on his face. "The game, Watson, is most assuredly afoot." Chapter 2. The Antiquarian's Web and the Whispers of the Market. Our departure from Ashworth House left Mr. Grimshaw with a visible sigh of relief, though I suspected the mystery's weight had merely transferred from his shoulders to Holmes's. The fog had begun to thin, revealing a pale, indifferent sky as we hailed another hansom. To Fleet Street, Watson, Holmes instructed the driver, settling back into his seat with an air of renewed purpose. We must consult with a certain expert regarding those peculiar coins Mr. Grimshaw found. And the leaf, of course. Everything in this case, however seemingly trivial, has a resonance. Our destination was a cramped, cavernous establishment tucked away down a narrow alley off Fleet Street, far removed from the genteel quiet of Belgravia. It was Mr. Ezra Finch's Antiquarian Emporium, a place where the scent of aged paper, dust, and forgotten histories hung heavy in the air. The shop was a labyrinth of overflowing shelves, glass display cases, and precarious stacks of books and artefacts from every conceivable corner of the globe. Mr. Finch himself emerged from behind a mountain of ancient scrolls, a diminutive man with spectacles perched on his nose, a magnifying loupe dangling from a cord around his neck, and hands stained with ink and the grime of centuries. His eyes, magnified by his lenses, were shrewd and endlessly curious. "Sherlock Holmes, by all that is dusty and rare!" he exclaimed, a smile crinkling his already wrinkled face. "To what obscure corner of the past do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Holmes, with a rare flash of humour, produced the 5 ancient coins and the dried leaf from a small evidence pouch. "Mr. Finch, I require your unparalleled expertise in numismatics and botany, however briefly." Finch carefully took the items, his fingers, surprisingly delicate, turning each coin over. His eyes widened slightly. "By Jove, Holmes, these are remarkable. A set of 5 ancient Lycian silver staters dating from the 4th century BC. Extremely rare, even individually, but to find a set like this, and in such condition. They originate from the Xanthus region, deep within ancient Lycia, now part of modern-day Turkey. These bear the distinct iconography of the Dinas Pericles, most unusual to see them outside a museum collection, and this leaf—" He sniffed it delicately, then held it to the light. "Ah, yes, Pancratium maritimum, the sea daffodil, found along the Mediterranean coast, particularly in the Aegean region. Its bulbs are known to contain certain alkaloids, historically used in small doses for ceremonial purposes, and in larger, well, let's say for less benign ends. But this is a dried leaf, not a bulb." He looked at Holmes, a question in his magnified eyes. "Precisely my thought, Mr. Finch," Holmes replied. "The coins and the leaf point to a very specific geographical origin, do they not? Ancient Lycia, or at least the Mediterranean coast?" "Undoubtedly," Finch confirmed. "Alistair Croft, as I recall, was quite the collector of obscure antiquities, with a particular fascination for pre-Hellenic cultures. He often frequented my establishment, seeking items of similar provenance." "Did he ever speak of a particular symbol, perhaps a spiralling pattern, associated with these Lycian artefacts, or with any other acquisition?" Holmes inquired, pulling out Grimshaw's sketch. Finch peered at the sketch. Yes. This is not uncommon on some minor votive offerings from the region. A stylized rendering of a ram's horn often associated with a protective ward or a particular deity. Rather obscure, mind you, not something one would find readily discussed outside specialist circles. Mr. Croft did, in fact, once commission me to seek out a particular Lycian tablet bearing similar intricate patterns. He was quite adamant about it, but I never located one to his satisfaction. "Thank you, Mr. Finch," Holmes said, retrieving the items. "You have provided us with invaluable direction." As we left the dusty confines of the Emporium, Holmes's steps were lighter. Lycia, Watson. A specific region, a specific culture, and a specific botanical reference. The pattern on Croft's foot, too, resonates with Finch's description. Our man was not merely a collector, he was intimately connected to this region in a way that goes beyond casual interest. But to what end? I pondered. And how does it connect to his demise? "That, my dear Watson, is the very essence of the inquiry," Holmes replied. "Now, I believe a visit to the docks is in order. If Mr. Croft was acquiring such rarities, he would have needed contacts amongst importers and shipping agents, particularly those handling goods from the Mediterranean. We found ourselves, shortly after, in the chaotic maelstrom of Billingsgate Fish Market, though our interest lay not in the day's catch but in the periphery, the bustling warehouses and shipping offices that lined the Thames further east. The air here was thick with the tang of brine, fish, and damp earth, a stark contrast to the scholarly air of Finch's shop. The market pulsed with a raw, vital energy. Porters shouted, gulls wheeled overhead, and the murmur of 100 dialects mingled in the damp air. Holmes led us through a maze of barrels and crates to a small, unassuming shipping agent's office, its window opaque with grime. The sign above the door read, Murchison & Sons, Global Import and Export. Inside, a burly man with a florid face and a booming laugh, Mr. Murchison Sr. sat behind a desk piled high with manifests. He greeted Holmes with a hearty slap on the back, clearly an old acquaintance. "Holmes, you old fox, what brings you to these malodorous environs? Chasing a smuggler, or merely craving a fresh Dover sole?" "Neither, Mr. Murchison," Holmes responded, a hint of amusement in his tone. "I'm inquiring about the late Mr. Alistair Croft. Did your firm handle any particular consignments for him, especially from the Eastern Mediterranean in recent times?" Murchison stroked his chin, his jovial expression replaced by a thoughtful frown. "Croft, eh? A regular, he was. Always for unusual items. Had a keen eye for it." "Yes, we did. Just a few months ago, actually. A rather large crate declared as architectural salvage from Izmir. Paid top coin for a discreet delivery. Said it was a fragile antiquity. Wouldn't let anyone but himself oversee its unpacking. Demanded it be brought directly to a private warehouse he leased down by the Rotherhithe docks. Very particular he was." "Rotherhithe docks, you say?" Holmes repeated, his eyes narrowing. "And the specific warehouse?" Murchison rummaged through a stack of papers, eventually pulling out a worn ledger. "Ah, here it is. Warehouse 7B, down by St. Mary's. Leased under a private trust, but it was Croft himself who handled the keys and supervision. An odd spot for a man of his standing to keep his treasures, I always thought. Full of derelict barges and forgotten corners down there." "Thank you, Mr. Murchison," Holmes said, rising. "Your memory, as always, is exceptionally precise." As we made our way back through the bustling market, Holmes remained silent for a long moment, observing the ebb and flow of humanity. "Watson," he finally declared, his voice low and intense, "Mr. Croft's cardiac event appears less a natural tragedy and more a curtain drawn on a dangerous play. He was collecting not merely antiquities, but secrets, perhaps even something potent. The coins, the leaf, the symbol, the clandestine delivery to a desolate warehouse. All these threads are weaving a tapestry of intrigue that stretches far beyond Belgravia. We must investigate this warehouse. I have a distinct premonition that our next discovery awaits us amidst the shadows and echoes of forgotten docks, perhaps shedding a brighter, albeit grimmer light on Mr. Croft's true fate." Chapter 3. The Cryptic Chamber and the Whispers of the Past. The journey to Rotherhithe docks was a descent into a forgotten London, a landscape dominated by the skeletal remains of industry, silent barges rocking gently in the murky water, and the omnipresent scent of the Thames, a potent blend of mud, coal, and salt. The fog, which had momentarily receded, now crept back with renewed vigour, transforming the docks into a ghostly realm where every silhouette seemed to hold a secret. Warehouse 7B stood as a desolate monument to neglect, its brickwork crumbling, its windows boarded up and grimy. The lock on the main door was old and rusty, but Holmes, after a moment's inspection, produced a set of picks, and with a few practised turns, the heavy bolt slid back with a groan of protest. Inside, the air was cold and stagnant, thick with dust and the pervasive dampness of the river. Faint shafts of watery light filtered through cracks in the roof, illuminating motes dancing in the gloom. The vast space was largely empty, save for stacks of disused crates and the shadowy forms of forgotten machinery. My initial impression was one of profound disappointment. It seemed merely a storage place for forgotten detritus. Holmes, however, was already moving, his keen eyes sweeping every surface. He produced a small, powerful lantern from his bag, its beam cutting through the gloom, revealing the intricate patterns of dust on the floor. "No ordinary storage, Watson," he murmured. "Observe the distinct absence of a thick layer of dust in certain areas, suggesting recent deliberate activity, and the subtle differences in the texture of the floor here, by the far wall." He directed the beam to a section of the brick wall that, upon closer inspection, appeared subtly different from the rest. The bricks were cleaner, more evenly laid, and the mortar lines were unusually precise. "A false wall, I surmise," Holmes declared. With a powerful shove, he tested the integrity of the bricks. One section gave way with a faint creak, revealing a narrow hidden doorway. Beyond lay a small, surprisingly well-maintained chamber. The air here was less stale, almost as if it had been recently aired. The chamber was sparsely furnished. A sturdy wooden table, 2 chairs, and a single locked wooden chest, reinforced with iron bands, positioned prominently in the centre. The walls of this inner sanctum were devoid of the dock's grime, instead adorned with curious faded tapestries depicting scenes that seemed ancient, perhaps Lycian, showing figures engaged in rituals under strange star-filled skies. On the table lay a single leather-bound journal and a peculiar carved wooden box. "A private sanctuary, or perhaps a clandestine laboratory, Watson," Holmes whispered, his voice resonating with suppressed excitement. "And this, I wager, is where Mr. Croft truly spent his private hours, far from the prying eyes of Belgravia." He moved to the table, picking up the wooden box. It was intricately carved with symbols that seemed to mimic the spiralling pattern Grimshaw had sketched. "The symbol on Croft's foot, Watson," Holmes observed. "Repeated here, this is no mere coincidence." He tried the lid of the box, finding it unlocked. Inside lay a collection of dried herbs and powders, each in a tiny stoppered glass vial, along with several more of the dried Pancratium maritimum leaves. The air in the chamber now carried a faint, sweet, earthy aroma, identical to the one Mr. Grimshaw had detected on Croft's body. "A private collection of botanical curiosities," I ventured. "Or, Watson, a private apothecary of the deadliest kind," Holmes countered, his gaze now fixed on the leather-bound journal. He opened it carefully. The entries were in a neat, precise hand, dated over several months. Many pages were filled with what appeared to be botanical drawings and cryptic notes in a language I did not recognise, interspersed with occasional English phrases. Holmes quickly deciphered a key. Pancratium maritimum, sleep weaver. Dosage, precise. Effect, cardiac irregularity, slow onset, mimicking natural failure. Antidote, none known, except, here, a different symbol. He pointed to a small stylized lotus flower. "This, Watson, is not a simple natural death. Croft was poisoned. The cardiac event was orchestrated." My blood ran cold. Poison? But by whom? And why leave such a detailed record? "Perhaps not left by Croft himself, Watson," Holmes mused, turning more pages. "Or perhaps a record for himself for some larger, more dangerous purpose. Look here. Names, dates, and references to the Brethren of the Serpent's Eye, and a chilling passage. The harvest draws near, the final infusion to be administered by the hand of the serpent at the appointed hour on the day of the new moon. The sacrifice will be complete." Holmes's finger traced a particular entry, dated just a few days before Croft's death. "Preparation of the final dosage of Sleep Weaver for the initiate of the Golden Chalice. Symbol marked, as per ritual. The way must be cleared. The initiate of the Golden Chalice." "Croft?" I stammered, feeling a profound chill. "And the symbol marked, like the one on his foot?" "Precisely, Watson," Holmes affirmed, his voice grim. "Croft was not the victim of a random act, but a participant, albeit perhaps an unwilling one, in some darker design. He was not merely poisoned, but ritually marked. This Brethren of the Serpent's Eye is no doubt a secret society, and Croft, it seems, was deeply involved, or perhaps was being removed from it." He turned his attention to the locked chest. "This, I believe, will contain the true heart of the matter." The chest proved difficult, requiring several minutes of Holmes's meticulous work with his picks. Finally, with a click, the lid sprang open. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was not gold or jewels, but an array of ancient artifacts. Small, intricately carved idols with serpent motifs, a collection of scrolls tied with faded ribbons, and, most chillingly, a ceremonial dagger with a hilt shaped like a coiled serpent, its blade gleaming with a sinister, well-polished sheen. But it was not these that held Holmes's immediate attention. It was a framed photograph, carefully preserved, nestled amongst the scrolls. The photograph showed a group of 6 individuals dressed in robes, their faces partly obscured by hoods, standing before what appeared to be ancient ruins, unmistakably Lycian. In the foreground, without a hood, stood a younger Alistair Croft, his face earnest, almost fanatical, and beside him, her face clear and striking, was a woman with intensely piercing eyes and severe yet beautiful countenance. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice low, a note of profound gravity in it, "this changes everything. This photograph depicts a gathering of the Brethren of the Serpent's Eye in their original habitat. Croft was not merely involved, he was a key player. And this woman—" Holmes studied her face intently. "I recall seeing her before, in the social pages. Lady Eleanor Blackwood, a prominent figure in London's aristocratic circles, known for her exotic art patronage and her enigmatic charm. It seems Mr. Croft's demise is not merely a botanical mystery, but a web of high society, ancient cults, and very modern treachery. The game has indeed deepened, my dear fellow, and the players are far more dangerous than we initially imagined." Chapter 4. The Artist's Secret and the Train to Dover. The revelations within Warehouse 7B had propelled our investigation into an entirely new, more perilous direction. The thought of Lady Eleanor Blackwood, a woman of such high standing, being connected to a secret society and a ritualistic poisoning, painted a stark contrast to the quiet, scholarly image of Mr. Croft. The fog had lifted, giving way to a raw, blustery afternoon as we returned to civilization. "Lady Eleanor Blackwood," Holmes repeated, deep in thought as we settled into a cab. "Wife of Sir Charles Blackwood, a man of considerable influence within the Admiralty. Her connections alone make this a delicate matter, Watson. We must tread with utmost caution." But what possible motive could she have for eliminating Croft, particularly if they were both part of this Brethren? I pondered aloud. "That, my dear fellow, is the very question that now vexes us," Holmes replied, his eyes distant. "Perhaps a power struggle, a betrayal within the cult, or a sacrifice demanded for some greater, more sinister objective. The journal spoke of clearing the way and a harvest. These are not terms of camaraderie. Our next destination was a rather bohemian quarter of Chelsea, a warren of studios and workshops, a world away from the aristocratic grandeur of Belgravia or the industrial grit of Rotherhithe. Holmes had surmised that if Lady Eleanor was indeed connected to this cult, and with her known patronage of the arts, there might be a subtle link to be found in her public persona. He had recalled a passing mention in a society column of her commissioning a series of pieces from an avant-garde artist known for incorporating exotic symbolism. We soon located the studio of Miss Penelope Thorne, nestled atop a narrow building, accessible by a creaking, paint-splattered staircase. The studio itself was a riot of colour and controlled chaos. Canvases leaned against walls, pots of pigment sat alongside brushes of every size, and the air was redolent with the earthy scent of oils and turpentine. Miss Thorne was a woman of fierce independence, with an unruly mass of auburn hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and defiance. She wore a paint-stained smock and greeted us with a directness that was refreshing after the evasiveness of others. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. "I confess, I am more accustomed to commissions for portraits than inquiries of a detective nature. To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "Miss Thorne," Holmes began, his tone courteous but penetrating, "we are investigating the recent demise of Mr. Alistair Croft. We understand Lady Eleanor Blackwood has commissioned several pieces from you. Could you describe the nature of these works?" Miss Thorne's expression clouded slightly. "Lady Eleanor is indeed a patron, a generous one at that. She has an unusual aesthetic, a fascination with ancient symbols and mythologies. My last series for her was inspired by Lycian funerary art. Incorporating symbols she provided, she was quite specific about the patterns. Spirals, coiled serpents, winged figures. Very particular indeed." Holmes produced the sketch of the spiralling symbol from Croft's foot. "Was this among the symbols she provided, Miss Thorne?" The artist's eyes widened in recognition. "Yes, that one particularly. She called it the Serpent's Eye, and said it represented protection in the journey to the underworld, or some such arcane notion. She seemed very invested in its accurate depiction." "Did Lady Eleanor ever speak of Mr. Alistair Croft in connection with these symbols or your commissions?" I inquired. Miss Thorne hesitated, a flicker of discomfort in her gaze. "Only once, indirectly. She mentioned Mr. Croft was a man of refined tastes, but perhaps too eager to delve into matters best left undisturbed. It was an odd comment, delivered with a strange, almost cold detachment. She also expressed a desire to acquire certain authentic, ritualistic implements for her collection, suggesting they would add verisimilitude to the atmosphere of her private studies. Holmes exchanged a meaningful glance with me. "And when was your last meeting with Lady Eleanor, Miss Thorne?" "Just yesterday, in fact," she replied, her brow furrowed. "She collected a final painting in the series. She seemed agitated, preoccupied. Spoke of an urgent journey she had to undertake, requiring her departure from London this very evening. Said it was a matter of personal spiritual pilgrimage. I confess, her urgency struck me as rather out of character for such a composed lady." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "An urgent journey this evening, you say? And where might this pilgrimage lead, Miss Thorne?" "She did not specify," Thorne said, shaking her head. "Only mentioned a train, and that her destination was beyond the reach of London's judgments. It all felt rather dramatic, to be honest." "Thank you, Miss Thorne," Holmes said, rising abruptly. "You have, perhaps unwittingly, provided us with a crucial piece of the puzzle. Your honesty is most appreciated." As we descended the creaking stairs, Holmes's mind was clearly racing. Watson, a train journey this very evening, for a woman connected to a poisonous cult, on the heels of a ritualistic murder. This is no pilgrimage, but an escape. The hand of the serpent mentioned in the journal, the one who administered the final infusion, must be Lady Eleanor herself. She is fleeing London, likely taking with her evidence or secrets that could unravel this entire conspiracy. "But where would she go?" I asked, trying to keep pace with his rapid deductions. "And how do we possibly intercept her on such short notice?" "The journal mentioned Lycia, Watson. The coins, the leaf, the symbols, all point to the Mediterranean. A journey beyond the reach of London's judgments would suggest leaving the country entirely. And the quickest route for such a departure, for a person of her standing, would be the Continental Express via Dover." We raced through the bustling streets towards Charing Cross Station, the heart of London's railway network. The station was a grand, echoing edifice, its platform shrouded in steam and the clamour of departing trains. Porters rushed past, shouting destinations, while passengers, enveloped in their journey's anticipation, hurried to board. The air hummed with the energy of imminent travel. Holmes, with a swift inquiry to a station master, confirmed that the express train to Dover, connecting with the Continental ferry, was due to depart in precisely 20 minutes. A first-class carriage had been booked under the name Lady E. Blackwood. "We are cutting it rather fine, Watson," Holmes remarked, his eyes scanning the crowds with an intense predatory focus. "She will likely be among the last to board, to avoid undue attention. Our task is to intercept her before that iron behemoth carries her, and the truth, across the channel." Suddenly Holmes gripped my arm, his gaze fixed on a distant figure emerging from a hansom cab. There she was, Lady Eleanor Blackwood. She was dressed in an elegant travelling coat, a hat with a discreet veil obscuring part of her face, but her aristocratic bearing and piercing eyes were unmistakable. She carried a small leather valise, clutching it perhaps a little too tightly. She moved with a calculated haste towards the first-class carriages, a porter struggling to keep up with her determined pace. "She carries something important, Watson," Holmes murmured, already moving through the throng. "Perhaps the very ritualistic implements Miss Thorne spoke of, or documents vital to her escape. We must confront her. The answers to Mr. Croft's demise and the dark machinations of the Brethren of the Serpent's Eye are about to be revealed here, amidst the steam and the promise of escape, on the very precipice of her flight." Chapter 5. The Serpent's Nest and the Unveiling of Truth. The platform at Charing Cross was a maelstrom of activity, the shriek of steam whistles and the thunder of escaping vapour filling the air as the Continental Express prepared for departure. Holmes, with his characteristic disregard for convention, moved with swift determination through the throng, his gaze never leaving Lady Eleanor. I followed close behind, a sense of mounting anticipation and unease settling upon me. Lady Eleanor, with an almost imperceptible quickening of her step, was now ascending the private steps to a first-class carriage, her porter already stowing her valise. Just as she was about to disappear into the compartment, Holmes called out, his voice cutting through the din with surprising clarity. Lady Eleanor, a moment, if you please." She froze, her elegant figure silhouetted against the carriage window. Slowly she turned, her veiled face betraying a flash of annoyance, which quickly morphed into a chilling composure as she recognised Holmes. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice cool and measured, "to what do I owe this intrusion? I am about to depart on a pressing journey." "A journey, I believe, designed to distance you from the untimely death of Mr. Alistair Croft," Holmes countered, his eyes fixing hers with an unblinking intensity. "A death, Lady Eleanor, that was not a natural cardiac event, but a carefully orchestrated poisoning, complete with ancient ritualistic markings and administered, if my deductions are correct, by your very own hand." A flicker of something, fear, anger, passed across her features before she regained her aristocratic hauteur. "Your accusations are baseless, Mr. Holmes, and frankly insulting. I knew Mr. Croft socially nothing more. His passing was tragic but natural." "Indeed," Holmes conceded, stepping closer. "Yet the sleep-weaver extract, derived from Pancratium maritimum, discovered in Mr. Croft's private clandestine laboratory in Rotherhithe, tells a different story, as does the journal detailing the Brethren of the Serpent's Eye, the Initiate of the Golden Chalice, and the Hand of the Serpent, your role in this grim tableau. The spiralling symbol found etched on Mr. Croft's foot, identical to those you commissioned Miss Thorne to paint, and those found in your secret society's artefacts, links you inextricably to his ritualistic demise." Lady Eleanor's veneer began to crack. Her hands, clasped tightly, trembled almost imperceptibly. "You speak of fancies, Mr. Holmes, of obscure cults and unfounded accusations. I am merely a collector of art, a patron of ancient studies." "A convenient cover, Lady Eleanor," Holmes retorted, his voice hardening, "for a far more sinister enterprise. The journal outlines a scheme to acquire certain influential figures, binding them to the Brethren through shared secrets, and, if necessary, through removal. Croft, it seems, was deemed an obstacle. Perhaps he was about to betray the Brethren, or perhaps he refused a final critical command. The harvest, Lady Eleanor, was his carefully planned elimination, clearing the way for a more pliable candidate. The specific botanical poison, the ritualistic marking, the carefully concealed warehouse, all point to a deliberate, calculated act, and the Continental Express to Dover would have been your convenient escape from London's inconvenient truths. Suddenly, the guard's whistle pierced the air, a long, shrill blast. The train gave a lurch. Lady Eleanor's eyes darted frantically towards the interior of the carriage. "The valise, Lady Ellen," Holmes stated, pointing to the small leather case the porter had placed just inside the compartment. "I surmise it contains not merely your personal effects, but perhaps the remaining vial of sleep-weaver or other incriminating documents pertaining to the Brethren. Or perhaps," he added, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, "the ceremonial dagger of the Hand of the Serpent." Her face, now pale beneath the veil, betrayed a flicker of genuine terror. She made a sudden, desperate lunge for the valise, but Holmes was quicker. With a movement too swift for my eye to follow, he intercepted her, securing the valise. "I believe this belongs with the authorities, Lady Eleanor," Holmes said, holding the valise aloft, "along with yourself." At that moment, two plainclothes officers, whom Holmes had clearly instructed to remain discreetly in the vicinity, stepped forward. They had been waiting for their cue. Lady Eleanor, her composure entirely shattered, let out a frustrated cry. "You cannot prove a thing. Without witnesses, without a direct link, my word against your fantastical theories." "Ah, but you forget, Lady Eleanor," Holmes replied, his eyes sparkling with triumph. "The Undertaker, Mr. Grimshaw, whose meticulous observations first brought this case to my attention. The antiquarian, Mr. Finch, who identified the Lycian origins of your symbols and botanical poison. The artist, Miss Thorne, who confirmed your specific interest in these symbols and your sudden, urgent departure. And of course, the very journal in Croft's possession, detailing the ritual, the poison, and your ominous title as the Hand of the Serpent. The evidence, Lady Eleanor, is a symphony of interconnected facts, and your attempt to flee is merely the final discordant note in your confession." The officers escorted a visibly shaken Lady Eleanor Blackwood from the train, her desperate flight arrested on the very threshold of escape. As the train pulled away, leaving us on the emptying platform, Holmes handed the valise to one of the officers. "I trust you will find its contents most illuminating, Inspector." He turned to me, a faint smile on his lips. Another thread unravelled, Watson. Another attempt to cloak villainy in the guise of respectability, exposed by the patient observation of seemingly trivial details. The peculiar scent, the rare coins, the dried leaf, the unusual mark on the foot, each was a whispered clue, guiding us through the fog and shadows of London and into the dark heart of a most elaborate deception. And it all began with a most extraordinary letter from an undertaker, whose keen eyes perceived a truth that officialdom had dismissed. The late afternoon sun, finally breaking through the clouds, cast long shadows across the platform as we made our way out, leaving the echoes of the departing train and the arrested villainy behind us. It was another victory for logic, for observation, and for the tireless intellect of my dear friend Sherlock Holmes. Thank you for joining us on this intricate journey through the labyrinthine alleys of crime and deduction. I hope you found